and welcome to our Family Voice Zoom session this morning. Andrew McColl from obviously Family Voice Queensland. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this morning Kirralie Smith. Kirralie Smith is a lady from the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and she's gotten herself involved in some controversial matters of late. And so welcome, Kirralie, to our Zoom session this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew.
Kirralie, you're an Australian Christian lady married to your husband for 25 years. When it seemed you couldn't have children, you began providing foster care for 3 children. Then, lo and behold, you fell pregnant. So now you've raised 3 foster children, had 3 children of your own, you homeschooled them, and now they've begun to get married and have children. Seems like you've been very busy parents. So why did homeschooling seem so appealing to you?
Yeah, well, let me just clarify that we had 2 foster children. Then a few years later, we ended up with the 3 who have been in our lives ever since. But we only raised them part-time. Their mother came back into the picture, and we had a really good relationship with her. So the 3 foster children all did go to school, but we had a lot of involvement in their life. I did a lot of tutoring, and they spent a lot of school holidays and weeknights with us.
Right.
I own 3 children who are funny enough. You hear this story a lot. So we picked up the 3 foster children. They were twin 4-year-old boys and a 3-year-old girl. And that was on the Saturday. And on the Tuesday, I found out I was pregnant with my son, who we'd been trying to fall pregnant for 4 years. So give glory to God for that. I love telling that story. But our 3 children, who are now 20, 18, and 15, I have homeschooled the entire time. And my husband and I had both worked in the school system. I was a biblical studies teacher at a Christian school. My husband was a groundsman. We'd been exposed for several years to the school environment. But one of our really good friends introduced us to the concept of homeschooling. And what really resonated for us was the fact that we could identify our children and know their strengths and weaknesses better than anyone else, even the best teacher in the world. And there's some really good teachers in the world, and it's not that the school system is all bad. But we would be able to fan into flame their strengths and support them in their weaknesses better than anyone else can, particularly in that classroom environment of, around 30 children, which I had seen. We'd also, through our investigations, realised that about 1 in 5 kids thrive in that sort of system, 2 in 5 survive, and the other 2 really shouldn't be there. There's better systems, and that also really resonated with us. And the third thing that really sealed the deal for me was I guess you could call it the Greek and the Hebrew mindset. And the Greek mindset is what rules or governs our institutional educational system, which is all about information. We've got the standard plans that every kid at 7 years old has to know this, and at 9 years old they have to know that. It's just information. There's some skills that go with that, and then relationship is third, and not really a high priority in school, even though there's so many anti-bullying programs and everything else that goes on. That's where kids are bullied. It's where kids who are really bright, learn to think that they're very dumb because they don't fit that system. And the Hebrew mindset is really the inversion of that. And that is that relationship is first. So relationship with God, family, community. Second is skills. As we know, every rabbi, including Jesus, had to have a trade. It's very important to understand what you're gifted at, what you're skilled at, what you're talented at, what good works can you do with your hands and your mind. And then the information supports that to help develop the whole character, the whole person. And so that is exactly what we set out to do, and I believe what we've achieved with our 3 children, who I've just, it's not roses and chocolates every day, but when you keep the goals in mind for homeschooling, and that you want to develop children who have strong character, strong morals, a great foundation, that they're servant-hearted, community-hearted, that they're leaders in what that they do, and that they don't have to fit any mold. Well, my 20-year-old, my 18-year-old, and my 15-year-old, I think the fruit's on the vine, and I've just delighted so much, and such a privilege, because no one on earth can love my children the way I can. And I would say that to any mum and dad out there who's considering this process.
Great. So your husband's a tradie, and you began to confront what seemed to be some irregular activities with meat exports and halal certification. And this seemed to give you something of a public profile. This led into the same-sex marriage debate. And later you were asked by others to start Binary. What is Binary?
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, very accidental pathway into all of this. And as you said, I got quite a public profile. So through the same-sex marriage campaign, I wasn't an official part of the Marriage Alliance. There was a lot of great spokespeople through that campaign, but I did make some videos where I call it ranted and raved about the fact that if we redefine the words marriage, we'll have to redefine other words, and children would also become very exposed and targeted by sexualized content. And so through that, obviously the marriage campaign was not successful. I met some other people who were behind the Marriage Alliance, or involved with the Marriage Alliance through my dealing with Cory Bernardi and being a leader in his Australian Conservatives. And out of the ashes, I guess you'd say, I was invited to consider thinking of starting an organisation that would deal with the fallout. And so that's what Binary does. We are dealing with the fallout of gender ideology, of everything that's happening now as a result of redefining the word marriage. So now we're seeing that the word woman is being redefined. We're seeing that children are now being called mature minors and being asked to, or not asked to, sorry, they're being exposed to sexualized content at a level that we've never seen before. And being really targeted in that. And as you know, it's a very divisive issue in society. However, you know, the majority and the silent majority believe, I guess what we would believe, that there's male and there's female, and that's all, folks, and that children should not be sexualized or exposed to sexualized content. So our organisation exists to lobby government and to raise awareness in the Australian public of what's happening, to run campaigns where, you know, whether that's phone calls, emailing, petitions, rallies, visiting politicians, but we're also supporting parents now, which is a byproduct in one way, but it's becoming a very large part of what we're doing, and creating resources, organising support groups, or people who are supporting organising support groups, because this issue is impacting and touching so many lives. It's really devastating. Every day I hear stories that break my heart, and you know, children's lives, families are being torn apart because of this insidious ideology that is like a religion, but has so much power in our nation at the moment to penalise those who oppose it or won't adhere to it.
So you've referred in our previous conversations to a kind of a who's who of conservative political figures in Australia who've been prepared to publicly support you, people like George Christensen, Cory Bernardi, Amanda Stoker, Lyle Shelton from Family First, Mark Latham, Pauline Hanson, and Malcolm Roberts from One Nation, along with Alex Antic, Claire Chandler, John Ruddock, and Ralph Babette from the UAP. Has this kind of support been an encouragement to you?
Absolutely, you know, and there are more, but the ones you've just mentioned have been very vocal, I guess, in the public space about gender ideology and the issues that have arisen. They've attracted a lot of criticism and flack for doing so, but they stand firm in their resolution. And it's really wonderful because we need people in every sphere of public life and private life to stand for truth. It's really, really important to stand for truth and the facts and evidence. Cool. And these men and women who are elected politicians or have been in the past inspire me with their bravery and courage. They also encourage me, both publicly and privately, to keep going with what I'm doing. So I know that, again, behind the scenes, there's a lot of politicians that are too afraid to speak out because they don't want to cop the same flack that these guys have had to deal with. So I do want to encourage those politicians and show them that the numbers are behind them and that they can also have that same courage to stand firm and to do the right thing.
Good, yeah. So when we look at the scripture and we find that Elijah challenged the people on Mount Carmel to choose between serving God and Baal, the Bible says that the people did not answer him a word. Is that how you've felt sometimes?
Absolutely. I refer to the Elijah story a lot with my family, saying, oh, sometimes I wish God would just send me to a stream and feed me with ravens because it seems too hard. Other days, I do feel like I'm sitting under a tree crying, going, I'm the only one. But also I know the rest of that story, and that there was a remnant, and there were faithful in the thousands. And I'm nowhere near, the caliber of Elijah, and I'm not doing the same thing as Elijah. But in that story, in that encouragement from the Bible, I know that God has set apart others. He sends them to me quite often. I see what you guys are doing with Family Voice. I see other organizations, other politicians, other women in this space, and I am greatly encouraged. And I know that I'm not alone, even though it feels like I'm alone. So I will have that courage. And I hope and I pray that even if I was the last man standing, that I would stand and that I would do the right thing, because this isn't about popularity. It's not about, I don't want to be affected by the criticism, and I don't want to be affected by the praise. I want to do what is right, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And this is an issue of truth. And so anything that stands against the truth is anti-truth or anti-Christ, and I will not be found on the side of anti-Christ. I will be found on the side of truth, and I want to stand firm no matter what. So I'm so thankful for the Bible and our heroes who have shown us time and time again that even if they believed they were alone, which they weren't, they still did the right thing. And that's what inspires me and what I want to be able to do at the end of the day.
Do you think that many people quietly support you, but they're afraid to say so because they don't want to be attacked in social media or ostracized?
I know that for a fact. But I also know, we have over 100,000 email subscribers now, which just blows my mind every week when I send out an e-news that, of course, not all 100,000 will read it every week, but we are inundated every single week with emails from people who do vocally support us. But I always am getting comments of people saying, thank you, please keep doing what you're doing. I can't speak out because, and there's many reasons why people can't. The ones that break my heart the most are the parents of children who are going through this, and the parents know that if they speak out, they risk losing their children, because in some states in Australia, if parents oppose gender ideology for even their own children, that their children can be removed from their care and placed in some sort of child services. And so that breaks my heart, and I will speak out every day on their behalf. There are others who will lose employment or who will be, as you said, bullied or ostracized on social media. So there is a whole range of reasons, and I understand that, but I also really hope and pray that more and more will stand and be vocal and speak out. And I love what Riley Gaines, the swimmer in America, who has stood up and spoken very vocally, and she just says, speak louder. And so I want to say to people, speak louder. I will do it. I will do it with you, and I will lead from the front. But the more of us that speak louder, the better.
So it seems as though Christian faithfulness today means that we have to accept ostracism for simply telling the truth about human biology.
That's right. And, we even the most baby Christians should know that Jesus says, blessed are you when you're insulted and persecuted for his name's sake. And it shouldn't come as a surprise. I guess in Australia, we've had a few decades where she'll be right, mate, everything, was a fair go, and people didn't get too upset about things. But those days are gone. We don't live in that, the 80s and 90s anymore. This is 2023. And we, as Christians, have to expect that when we stand for truth and when we speak out on these issues or any issue about the sanctity of life, we are going to face opposition. We are going to face persecution. We are going to face insults and intimidation and all of those things. But our attitude really needs to be, so what? We know if we read to the end of the Bible, we win. God wins. Jesus wins. He will be exalted. And we can have the privilege of doing that right now, of being so blessed to stand in this place where we can help set the captives free, because what sets us free? The truth sets us free. So let's be truth seekers, not for our benefit, for the benefit of those who are held captive by these lies, by really damaging, hurtful things that are happening in our society. And it is the truth that will set us free.
So 2 male soccer players that you've never met or spoken to have placed apprehended violence orders, or AVOs, against you. Does that seem somehow bizarre to you?
Look, it's really hard, and obviously I can't say too much about it. They're still in the application stages. I have one hearing in Burwood on the 18th of September and another hearing on the 10th of October in Foster. My lawyers and I will go and we will vigorously defend the things that I've said and why I've said them, and that I will say over and over again, speaking the truth is not violence. I'm not violent. I have not acted violently. I don't believe this is the true use of the AVO laws. I'm very sad that this is happening. I'm very shocked. I'm very confused, but I'm very determined. I wish no ill towards these people, and this is about ideology, and it's not about individuals.
You've mentioned that your book relates stories from families whose children have suffered from the transgender propaganda. What does this teach us about the cult of transgender?
Oh, look, it's been a really hard journey, Andrew, and the devastating stories that are still coming in, just like I said, break my heart every day. We're still in the stages of collating those stories, and if anyone has stories that they want to share, they can send those to me at info@binary.org.au. But what we're learning is that this affects people from all walks of life and all faith backgrounds. There's many Christians even who are affected and impacted by this ideology. Their children have been swept up, by lies, and it is lies. No one can change their sex. It is an outright lie to say to a child that they can change their sex. They can't. It will only ever be imitation or pretend. Children are being lied to that, if they progress down this pathway and take puberty blockers, they're being told that those puberty blockers are reversible, but all the evidence is pointing to the fact that no, it's not, and it will lead to cross-sex hormones, which are very, very damaging, permanently damaging to young people in terms of affecting their sterility, their sexual function, their bone development, their brain development. It's actually horrifying when you understand the impact of these things. And recently, Pauline Hanson's One Nation filed a motion in the Senate to investigate these practices. And alarmingly, Labor, the Greens, even some coalition members voted against that motion, which is just mind-boggling, because the stories from parents is that irreversible harm and damage is being done. There's great division because schools are now empowered, especially in states like Victoria and Queensland and the ACT, and very soon in New South Wales. Schools are empowered to refer children to government services for basically walking down these pathways, being removed from their parents if parents disagree. If parents and counsellors want to affirm their natal sex, that is reality, that they are male or female, they can be in serious danger of being ripped apart in these other states at the moment. So it's really concerning. Parents feel like they're at a loss. They don't feel like churches or schools or even their local political members are supporting them, and they don't understand the depth of sorrow and harm that is occurring.
So what's happened to health departments in Australia wherein they've been seduced or convinced, or whatever it is, the right term is, dealing with the transgender cult? How is it that we've got health departments, 7 health departments, who are happy to simply go along with transgender as if it's the right thing for a child?
Oh, look, it's really mind-boggling in so many ways. Ultimately, it goes back to Julia Gillard, as one of her last acts as Prime Minister, removed the definitions of male and female from the Sex Discrimination Act. So there is no longer any protection for biological sex in the Sex Discrimination Act. There is protection, however, for people who identify as the opposite sex. And that is being held over the heads of, whether it's health departments, schools, anyone basically who opposes gender ideology, because now what's happened is that sex, gender identity is held at the same level. But what we know is that they're in direct opposition to one another, because sex relies on biological reality, whereas gender identity denies biological reality. And so now people like myself and Sal Grover and others are before the courts because these things are in law, and so health departments, health practitioners. I have had many GPs and counsellors contact me to say their hands are tied, and we've seen people like Dr. Gillian Spencer in Queensland actually stood down from her senior psychiatry position because she questioned the use of puberty blockers. So there's these legal threats that are really hamstringing so many people, and I think that's the bottom line, that we need to get the laws changed. But at the same time, the only way we're going to get the laws changed is for brave and courageous people like Gillian Spencer to stand up and say, no, this is unacceptable and we must challenge it.
So really, when we've accepted that, the notion of health departments by itself, that there is a government department or departments that have the power to say or to control what's commonly called health, even in that we've created a challenge, because it's gone down the road now so far that health is being redefined by these departments, so that the parents of the children who said, well, now this is a boy or this is a girl, are actually being told, well, now, yeah, but she thinks she's the other, or he thinks it's the other. So even that itself, that giving of that responsibility to a distant department actually itself leads to some of these problems.
Yes, and these departments are usually run by politicians and bureaucrats who aren't health experts. And so they're making decisions about our health that, they have no qualifications or experience to actually make those decisions. This has all become political rather than the best interests of the children or, even the adults in these situations at heart. And we're seeing such a huge number of detransitioners or desisters come out and tell their horror stories of, in a few consultations, they're given puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones, they're referred for surgery, they're led down these pathways and not given other options because bureaucrats in the health department have, decreed that this is the way things must go. And it's resulting in the most horrific consequences for these people.
And so what's also happening is these children, and I guess it's mainly children, who aren't actually being given a balanced perspective. They're not being told that if they do go down the road of puberty blockers or even surgery, that they won't be able to have children, full stop.
Correct. And look, let's be honest, children cannot consent to that sort of treatment. Even if they say they understand it, we know that children's brains don't develop completely until they're 25 years old or thereabouts. We don't allow children to make life-altering decisions such as getting tattoos, getting married, drinking alcohol, driving, vehicles and machinery. There's so many things that we have been responsible in society and understood that children are not capable of either giving consent or making those decisions. And yet all of a sudden we're saying that children can consent to medicalized pathways that are going to do irreversible harm. It's beyond reasonable in every single way.
So just taking that one step further, so what that really means is that children can be lied to, even through their GP or a health department person, told lies, but no one, it seems, can hold them to account for that.
And that's exactly what it seems at this stage. There is just a very small handful of medical practitioners speaking out about this. Parents feel helpless and hopeless in this. Gender departments in our country are prescribing these drugs. Let's also say this, they're off-label. These puberty blockers have never been tested or approved for the use that they're being used for at the moment. And our politicians sit down there in the Canberra bubble and refuse to even investigate or hold an inquiry into these things. It's a real mess.
Are you concerned about the federal government's plans to establish the Australian Communications and Media Authority?
I think it's terrifying. I really do. This, they already have so much power to put the power of truth into the hands of these politicians, where they get to decree what is truthful, what is acceptable, and get to penalise any, not even just opinion, but any fact that they don't like, is really, we're walking down a pathway to totalitarianism and authoritarianism that, George Orwell wrote as fiction, but we're going to experience as fact if these sort of bills are passed. It's very dangerous.
We saw YouTube recently of Jordan Peterson, where he was talking to Eric Metaxas about his book that he'd written, A Letter to the American Church, where Eric warns of the parallels between the German church of the 1930s and the US church of today in the face of some disturbing government trends. Do you share those concerns?
100%. That was a brilliant conversation. And like you, I recommend that everybody go and listen to the entirety of that conversation. And yes, I do think there's enormous parallels between what happened pre-World War II and what's happening now. And that is that, you know, a lot of people said they were either doing their job or, you know, they were intimidated and afraid for good reason. They were going to be penalised and punished and harmed for speaking out. But, you know, like Bonhoeffer and others, I think that regardless of the risk, we need to do the right thing. We need to speak out. I don't want to be counted in history as one who stood by and watched it happen. You know, if I suffer for the sake of truth, for the sake of Jesus, for doing this, then I suffer. But I suffer for doing the right thing. And at the end of the day, my reward is in him. It's not in what the government or the courts or the police or public opinion says about me. My reward is in him and what I know and what you know to be true and factual and you know, for the prosperity of our children, and I mean that in terms of health and well-being and life, then I don't think that's much of a price to pay at all.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to someone or to families who are challenged on these issues today, where they've got children who are perhaps teenagers or, you know, 12 or 13 years old, and they're encountering this propaganda? The children may have some uncertainties in their mind about their gender. Are they, I mean, yes, they might admit, yes, I'm born a girl, but I really think I might actually be a boy. And so there'll be probably over the whole of the population of Australia, there might be thousands of children like that in any given year. It might only be 0.5% of the population, but that's a challenge. And in some of these cases, it's leading down some very dark paths. So what would your advice be to families who've got children who are challenged in this regard?
Well, I'm not a health practitioner and I'm not a qualified counsellor, so I will not, you know, present advice from that level. But from a parent to another, I would say, of course, our children need love and compassion. The whole point of life is working out our identity, and is our identity in Jesus or in something else? And so that's my first and foremost thing, is to pray, to love them, to listen to them. Every parent that I've spoken to and every parent story that's going to be in our book, you know, speaks so much about listening to your child and then affirming your child that they can express themselves however they like, but there is a reality, you know, a male is a male, a female is a female, and how can they embrace that? They don't have to conform to stereotypes. They don't have to conform to what the world says. You know, Romans 12 tells us, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So scripture, all of those things, get support. You know, in this little session that we're having here, I can't give you all of those encouragements or all of those tools, but our website is developing those tools. Our team is developing those tools. You can email me, but support, truth, prayer, scripture, love, obviously really, really important. And finding a network that can support you. They do exist. They are very much underground, I guess you'd call it at the moment, because of the level of fear and ostracization that happens, but I can connect you to some of those networks. Also, you know, telling your story with those around you and with those who will listen is very important. We have cohorts that go along to politicians so that they can hear that. You can be anonymous in those, but it's really important that we raise that level of awareness. But right now, if you are experiencing this in your own family, please reach out. You're not alone. There is help and there are ways that we can come around you to do that. But my primary role in Binary is as an lobbyist and to raise awareness, but I can connect you to people who can support you in this really difficult stage of your life.
So just before we go to some questions from our viewers this morning, Kirralie, how can people support you?
Yeah, go to binary.org.au. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter. You can also donate, which is really important for the court cases. I'm facing 4 court cases at the moment. They're going to be lengthy and expensive, and it's a really difficult time. I always love words of encouragement, prayers, and scripture. If you want to send those through to me, I read them, I take them on board, and really value that a lot. We actually have a lot of people praying and fasting on a Tuesday, particularly for this issue, for the families who are experiencing what they're going through, for the churches who don't know how to handle it, for the court cases that are coming up, for all of those things. So anyone who wants to join in that is very welcome. But yeah, and more than anything, to share the information and raise that level of awareness, because ultimately the change has to happen at a legislation level. That will only happen if politicians know and understand that the majority of Australians are concerned about this issue and want to see the change.
Thank you, Kirralie. So I'll just pass it over to my friend and colleague, Peter Downey, who's with us this morning, and Peter will be taking some questions from our viewers. Peter, do you have any questions this morning?
Yes, I do have some questions, Andrew, for Kirralie. Kirralie, how could the church be more helpful to this cause and this struggle?
Well, that's a big question, first and foremost. And look, I've had some really difficult and sad conversations, both with church leaders and school principals about this issue. But I'm utterly convinced that the truth is the only way forward, that from the pulpit and leadership need to preach the truth. And I know that there's a lot of fear for churches in doing that. I know that they're worried about the consequences, but I say we can't be worried about the consequences. Teachers are going to be held, and preachers, to great account before God. And if you're not preaching the truth, that there's male and female only, that God created them and he said that they were very good, there's plenty of scriptural support for preaching the truth. And the fact is that lies won't get us anywhere. And supporting those lies that someone can change their sex, well, you know, Paul's very clear, Revelation's very clear that liars will not be accepted by God at judgment. And so I think we need to take that very seriously. I want to say to pastors and leaders, take courage, be strong, be very courageous in these hard days, and you will experience the blessing of God as you experience the persecution that may come to you. But be there for your congregation, be there for these families, and do the hard yards. You don't have to have all the answers, but by all means, please preach the truth. And if you're just in the congregation and your pastors refuse to preach the truth, well, I would encourage you to speak with them first, pray with them, and if they are adamant that they're not going to do that, then perhaps that is the place for you to be.
Yeah, very true. What have you found the best strategies to win this struggle, or what do you think are the best strategies?
Well, I think over the nearly 5 years now that I've been doing this, the lack of awareness is the biggest challenge that we've faced, because once people are aware of these issues, whether it's women in sport, whether it's puberty blockers for children, whether it's the laws surrounding all of these things, once people are made aware, and it doesn't matter what their work of life is. This isn't a left or right political issue. This isn't a Christian or atheist, there are people right across the spectrum of all ethnicities, all religious beliefs, whatever it is. When they get the information, they actually understand it and want to do something about it. So that's my first thing, is that if you are listening and you're already aware of these issues, then make sure you're sharing that awareness with others. Share facts. You don't have to embellish them. They're just the facts. And we have a lot of fact sheets on our website that can help you with that. The second thing is that a lot of politicians, they may feel the same way we do, but they just don't know what the public level of interest or support is on these things. So never underestimate. And, this isn't just about the gender issues. This is about all issues. Be in touch with your representatives. They are there to represent you in the parliament. So contact them, phone them, email them, make appointments to go and see them. I was very inspired recently by Angela Rogers, I think her name is, in South Australia. She found really objectionable, sexually explicit books in her library. So she went to her council meeting and she showed them Interestingly enough, she wasn't allowed to show the pictures because they were too graphic for the live stream that was happening from council, but they're allowed in the library. But this was just a mum who saw what's going on and wanted to make the councillors aware. And many of the councillors at the end of the meeting stood up and thanked her because they had no idea what was in the children's section of their local library. So there's lots of actions. We run lots of campaigns along those lines as well, whether it's emailing, making phone calls, taking action. But it's be informed, raise awareness, and take action of 3 very important things that people can do.
Yeah, great strategies, Kirralie. I've got a question here. How can parents equip their children to deal with the transgender issues in the schools?
That's another big question. I will always come back to truth. Tell your children the truth. My husband always says to our children, when bank tellers are being trained to recognize counterfeits, they just they have to handle the real thing all the time. And the more you handle the real thing, the more you can recognize the fake or the counterfeit. And I think it's the same. Parents need to really again, it's a struggle for identity. That's the whole struggle of life, is what is our identity? Do I belong to myself or to God, my creator? And if we bring up our children in the ways of the Lord, and we encourage them, and we fan into flame their strengths, and we equip them with the truth, then they will recognize those lies and counterfeits that are coming to them at school. So we have to be very actively engaged. I think parents need to take more responsibility in finding out exactly what is the school teaching them, what is the school's view and position on these matters, what can and can't they do. They need to stand with their children and immerse them, really bathe them in the truth of how beautiful and wonderful male and female and the differences are, that stereotypes don't need to be adhered to, and that they do need to love their fellow students when they're going through these things, but you don't have to reinforce a lie. Do not lie to one another. That is the most harmful thing that we can do. It's not easy, but it really does create a lot of harm if we participate in the lie.
Very true. Got another question here. Does it frustrate you that so many Christians don't want to get their hands dirty in the political fight, but would rather pontificate from the sidelines?
Of course it does. Of course it does. Look, I always say though too, I have all the energy in the world to fight the enemy and to stand. I don't even have to fight. I mean, Ephesians 6 tells us to put on the armor of God and to stand. And I've got all the time in the world to do that. I don't have much time to fight my brothers and sisters in the Lord. I have to accept that God will deal with them, that we're all part of the one body and we're different parts of the body. But I will encourage any Christian brother or sister that I come across to speak the truth. Again, I really just think it's that simple. Again, I don't think it matters what the issue is. We know the truth. We know the truth in Jesus. If we love Jesus, if we profess with our mouth to do that, then our actions need to follow. And so I'm not a person who's not afraid. I accept that there is fear in my life. There is anxiety, but I also know that God told me in the Bible more than 365 times or about that, do not be afraid, do not be anxious about anything, because he knows we will be afraid. He's not shaking his head at us going, oh no, you're afraid, I'm going to reject you now. He says, I know you're afraid, but come to me when you're weary and heavy laden, or no weapon formed against you will prosper. I take those scriptures seriously. Either the Bible is true or it's not, and I've accepted that it's true. So I will acknowledge my fear. I will take every thought captive to the throne of Jesus, and then I will do what's required of me next. And honestly, the freedom, the joy, the peace that I have, even in the midst of the battle, is beyond understanding, because I belong to him. And sorry, I know I'm speaking a lot, but the other thing that my husband has been so amazing. I love him so much. And I love, he is the leader of our home, and he empowers me and encourages me to do this. And he says to me all the time, the battle belongs to the Lord. You are just called to be salt and light. And so that will look different for every single one of us. But I take such great comfort and strength knowing that, yes, I just need to be salt and light. Just, amplify God, amplify the truth, amplify in every context that I can who he is. That all belongs to the Lord. So, that's my encouragement to my brothers and sisters who might feel afraid. Yes, feel afraid, but don't stay there. Keep going. And there is great reward for you if you do.
Yeah, wonderful words, Kirralie. I got one final question. You mentioned that some states were better than others. So if people do find themselves in a situation where they have to vote with their feet and move state, which ones are the ones to go to and which ones are the ones to avoid?
That's a hard question because every state is rapidly moving towards this. And interestingly enough, I'll have a blog out later today. The New South Wales, there's a sensitive kind of secret document that's been that's found its way to my desk. And as in Victoria, they want to actually penalise people who move states because of this, which is just beyond comprehension. That if you seek help or counsel in another state for these issues, you can be penalised under Victorian law currently, but New South Wales want to bring that in as well. I know WA is looking towards these things. South Australia, as I said, there is a bit of pushback at the moment. There really is, and particularly like the women's who run the Liberal Party supporters group, people like Alex Antic. There's a really good cohort, and churches are coming together in South Australia as well to really fight these things. So perhaps that would be my first port of call at the moment. But I would say, with the state you're in, please go and contact your local members. Please contact your senators. Please don't give up the fight where you are. Don't, some people will have to flee and find somewhere else, but most of us can stay right where we are and be salt and light and make a difference and be the change right where we are.
Thank you, Kirralie. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I suppose too, Kirralie, for those people who are in a state where they're feeling a bit intimidated that things are working against them, they can actually take their children out of the public system and homeschool them, can't they?
Absolutely. And, I get this, I have this conversation a lot, and it's one that I love to talk about. So many people are like, oh, I don't have the time, or I wouldn't have the ability, or I'm not equipped to do that. And I would say, yes, you are. Anyone can homeschool their children, and you can do it really well. A few points that I'll raise on this is, one, what's the goal of having children? What's the point? What does God want us to do with our children? I believe he wants us to raise them up in the ways that they should go. We have to make disciples. Like, yes, we make disciples outside of our families, but first and foremost, we're to make disciples of our children. And so how best to do that? Spend a lot of time with them, sharing the word of God, modeling to them what it looks like to handle all aspects of life, whether it's finances, household, the skills that we have, all of those things. That's how we model it. And we do model it best by involving our children in that process with us. So don't be intimidated or overwhelmed. You don't have to recreate school at home. That's not the point. The point is identify who your children are, fan into flame those strengths, and encourage them in their weaknesses, as I said. Can I give a few examples? I have a son and two daughters. My son is very academically minded, and science and maths, are his passion, whereas my daughters are very creative. So you tailor their education to those needs, to those desires, to those strengths, and you fan them into flame. Yes, I want them all to read. Yes, I want them all to be able to handle and steward the resources that God's given us. But at the same time, I look at them and go, where will they be fulfilled? Where will they fulfill the calling on their life? And so was I able to do all of the trigonometry with my son? Absolutely not. I could not and did not, but I found others who could do that for him. Or more than anything, I wanted to teach my children how to learn. And like, what better time in history? We have more tools at our fingertips to do that than ever. And so I wanted them to love learning. My husband and I model to them every day that we love learning. We're always learning. How are we learning? What do we have to do to learn? And so we do that with our children. My son is just turned 20. He's a fully qualified electrician. He's got other fingers in other pies that he's doing. My 18-year-old daughter is pursuing her love and gift in music, winning competitions, blessing other people with her worship songs, but she's also an elite athlete and a coach who is imparting things to the next generation. My 15-year-old daughter was actually headhunted by a real estate agent who just saw the potential in her, doesn't want to wait till she's 18, and has taken her on board as trainee, apprentice, and she's thriving in that environment. So I don't measure their income or even their job as their success, but what I see as their success is their Their character is being developed. They have a heart for others. They love to volunteer in the community. They love to share the word of God. They're not moved by other people's opinions. They know who they are, and they're pursuing God in all of those things. So I encourage every person out there, please consider homeschooling your children, because you can do a marvelous job by loving them well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Kirralie, for being with us this morning. We've appreciated you sharing with us. We're glad you're a talker. Don't be ashamed of that. Don't be ashamed of that. And we're glad, most of all, for who you are and what you're doing for your family and for those people who are moving in your circles. And we say with all our heart, God bless you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.